of what this instrument is, and the other speakers will be comparing and contrasting this experience, so it is important to understand. So what is RFT? How does this work, and origins of this policy? These are three things I will quickly cover. RFT is really based on common sense. And if you disagree, please let us know. It asks three simple questions. The first question, it asks, what are department's main objectives of the year? In my 6 years, I never came across a secretary to the government, a head of the department, who didn't know the objectives of the department. They would pretty much have a good idea of what the objectives of the department are. Once they tell you the objectives, you simply ask, if these are the objectives, what actions do you propose to take to achieve these objectives? Then most of them would tell you the policies, programs, and projects they intend to follow to achieve these objectives. The next logical question and commonsensical question is, if these are your actions, how do we know that you're making progress in achieving them? What are your key performance indicators? How do we judge as independent? What evidence will you bring to bear to say that, yes, you have actually made progress in achieving and implementing your program? That's all there is to RFT. The innovation was that we asked every department to put their answers to these questions in a uniform format. That is really what we asked them to do. And that format was, there were 6 sections to it. The first section was the ministry's vision, mission, and objectives. Again, straightforward, very common practice in most professionally run private sector organizations and also professionally run public sector organizations. Nothing new about that. The second section was where we innovated. Since independence, this was a section that had been ignored. And just to tell you what, there were 2 new things that were introduced. Having a set of criteria is nothing new. Every government pretty much is doing some evaluation and has success indicators, key performance indicators. So I've just taken an example so that people at the back can watch and see this clearly. Of course, in a real document, there are many more. These are 3 for illustration. That's what we mean by success indicators. But the innovation that we introduced was that if the government gives you 15 things to do, and you go to your boss at the end and say, sir, you had asked me to do 15 things, but out of those 15, I have achieved the target for 12. Is it good or bad performance? Well, it depends. If the 3 things that you were really supposed to do, the core objectives of your department, you didn't do those, but you did all the other dinky little stuff. I shouldn't be saying in an institute of training, but you sent people for training, you did some other exercises, but you didn't achieve the core objectives of your department. I'm afraid that's not good performance. So what we did was, and this is really the innovation that was introduced, and I hope after this symposium, when you go out and you find anybody is doing evaluation without prioritizing, that is no evaluation. But the essence of management is you need to prioritize. In life, things are not equally important. One of the big failures is that we have a list of things to do without prioritizing, and at the end, so you produce reports, but you really don't know, all things considered, is it on the whole acceptable or unacceptable? Now, this is not enough. Another fatal flaw of our evaluation system has been that we have always given single point targets. So we'll tell a department, please build 70 kilometers of road. Now at the end, the person comes and says, instead of 70 kilometers, I could only build 65.86 kilometers. Is it good, bad, ugly? You don't know. It depends. If the boss likes you, he says, Mr. Trivedi, that's close enough, let's go and have a beer. The boss doesn't like you, he says, you know, Mr. Trivedi, you're a nice man, but your problem is you never achieve targets. You know, and write something on my confidential report, and that's the end of my career. So this subjective power that bosses have over the subordinates is the bane of most of the problems in government. And that subjectivity leads to then all kinds of perverse behavior on part of both. And that's a slippery slope you don't know where you will end up with. Because all you know is that you must please your boss. That's all. Because ultimately that's what counts. So we introduced a 5-point scale ex ante. It need not be 5 point, it can be 6, it can be 9, 7, 3, whatever. But there must be a scale concept, and it must be agreed to ex ante, before the fact, that what would constitute excellence and what would constitute poor performance should be done at the beginning of the year. So that was the innovation that was introduced, and you will see that once you do this, then you come to a very objective conclusion at the end quite easily. And section 3 contained the trend values, because having an evaluation system with simply 1 point target is not helpful. You need to know what happened in the past 2 years, your actual achievement, what you plan to do in the future 2 years, so that you can put your targets in some perspective. In the language of IMF, it is called the medium-term expenditure framework. So it's an MTEF kind of approach. So it's much better than a single point budgetary approach that we tend to adopt. Section 4 is simply definitions. This is a document for people, the citizens of the country, and you need to explain the jargon. We tend to know, in the government we use jargon which we assume that everyone understands, but often that's not the case, so it's always good to have this. Section 5 was another innovation, because you find that government is really a team sport. Nothing in the government that we do, we can do individually. Almost everything requires collaboration, cooperation with others. So it's really a team sport, but we work, unfortunately, in silos. So this section was supposed to break that silos mentality and create a team spirit. The idea was to ask each department, who else do you need to perform and achieve your targets? So it was really about so we can do something about it at the beginning of the year. If you come at the end and say, look, I couldn't build the school because there was no water, electricity, and road, there's nothing we can do except for, jointly cry or hold someone, but country is not better off. Country is better off if you tell us these are the risks that I am dependent on road, water, and electricity on some other department, so then we can make sure that they are being done by the others. So it's ex ante coordination as opposed to ex post finger pointing. That's the point. Section 6 was introduced after 2 years, which is really the heart of it. Academics have actually failed the policymakers in this. Academics have these log frames where they will say, we want to ignore it, we wanted to put it in the document in section 6. In many cases, the input activities and outputs, that they forget the real outcomes. They say, well, our outcome is for the tribal people. We say, no, that could be an activity, or at best an output, can't be an outcome. To cut the long story short, after 2 years, we got them to agree that the real outcome that they should be striving for is to improve the Human Development Index for the tribal people. In fact, to close the gap between HDI for tribal people and the general population. So it takes a bit of education. These things don't happen overnight, but with some attempt, you can. And they agreed finally, and they put it in section 6.